I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. I've judged this course of action to be in the best interests of the United States of America and the pursuit of peace between Israel and the Palestinians.
With this statement, U.S. President Trump reversed 70 years of U.S. policy in the Middle East. He added that plans to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem are also underway, though the process might take a few years. Israeli President and Prime Minister hailed the announcement and encouraged other nations to also move their embassies.
Jerusalem's status is perhaps the most disputed in the world. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has added even more drama. Trump ended 7 decades of U.S. ambiguity on the issue, long fought over by Israelis and Palestinians. As expected, the move has rattled the Islamic world. Iran said serious repercussions would await the U.S. and Israel.
By doing this, they will be hit harder than before. The Islamic world will undoubtedly stand up to them. The enemy will absolutely be unable to achieve its desired goals on the issue of Palestine. Palestine will be liberated.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan had threatened to sever ties with Israel before Trump announced his decision. While meeting with the press in Ankara during a visit by Jordan's king, Erdogan warned the U.S. could create public unrest throughout the Islamic world.
Haberlerle ilgili üzüntülerimi bir kez daha ifade etmek istiyorum. Kudüs, Sayın Trump, Müslümanların kırmızı çizgisidir. Filistin halkının yaraları kanamaya devam ederken, her gün hak ihlalleri, zulümler, baskılar sürerken, İsrail'e destek mahiyetinde böyle bir kararın alınması sadece uluslararası hukukun ihlali değil, aynı zamanda insanlık vicdanına da vurulmuş ağır bir darbedir.
United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres reiterated that a two-state solution is the only way out.
In this moment of great anxiety, I want to make it clear there is no alternative to the two-state solution. There is no plan B.
The U.S.'s allies in Europe, including the U.K., France, and Germany, have also expressed disagreement over Trump's announcement. Meanwhile, Canada said its embassy will remain in Tel Aviv, adding that Jerusalem's status can only be determined as part of peace talks.
In Palestine, however, hundreds of angry protesters took to the streets of Gaza and burned U.S. and Israeli flags, while Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas warned of dangerous consequences.
These denounced and rejected measures create deliberate constraints to all the efforts towards realizing peace and reflect the United States' withdrawal from practicing its role as a peace mediator.
Israeli sovereignty over the entire city of Jerusalem isn't accepted by the global community, and its status is considered an issue that should be resolved through negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. Although Trump said the U.S. is not taking a position on how the city should be divided, leaders around the world expressed concerns that the move could widen the gap between Israel and Palestine.
Palestinians have issued a stern warning about the consequences of the U.S. plan to relocate the American embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem Al-Quds. The leader of Palestinian resistance movement Hamas said that Washington's move would be a dangerous escalation that crosses all red lines. Ismail Haniyeh stressed that the measure will enable, quote, the extremist regime of the Israeli Prime Minister to further Judaize the city. Hamas also called on all Palestinians to come out on Friday and mark it as a day of rage against the U.S. move. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas also described the move as unacceptable. The spokesman for the president said Abbas made some phone calls with leaders of Russia, France, Vatican, and Jordan, reiterating the position that Al-Quds is the Palestinian capital according to international and Arab resolutions and law. The Palestinian resistance movement Hamas has called for a new intifada or uprising in response to the U.S. recognition of Jerusalem Al-Quds as Israel's capital.
إننا نطالب وندعو وسنعمل على إطلاق انتفاضة في وجه الاحتلال الصهيوني. القرار الأمريكي عدوان على شعبنا، إعلان حرب على شعبنا الفلسطيني. أقول سيندم ندم شديد على هذا القرار.
Shots that you can hear. Israeli security forces trying hard, trying their best to stop Palestinians from protesting. Back there behind the smoke screen, you can see Palestinian protesters, some of them throwing stones. Well, this has been going on for almost a couple of hours, right after Palestinian leaders had pressers, had speeches in which they called the Palestinian people, the Muslim world, the Arab countries, to put aside their differences, to sit together, devise new strategies to counter Israel, and to protest against the recent U.S. decision and move in recognizing Jerusalem al-Quds as the Israeli capital.
President Trump's announcement on Jerusalem has a very worrying potential impact. It is a very fragile context, and the announcement has the potential to send us backwards to even darker times than the ones we are already living in. The European Union has a clear and united position. We believe that only realistic solution to the conflict between Israel and Palestine is based on two states.
French President Emmanuel Macron says he disapproves of the Trump administration's recognition of Jerusalem al-Quds as Israel's capital, calling it a unilateral decision. British Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson also said the U.S. move will not help resolve the Palestinian issue. Meanwhile, the Russian Foreign Ministry expressed serious concern over Trump's decision, saying it threatens security in the Middle East. Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop also said Canberra will not relocate its embassy to Jerusalem al-Quds.
When you consider how important the old city of Jerusalem has been to Jews, Christians, Muslims for thousands of years, the visitor to the city may be surprised to find just how small the old city is. In fact, Mark Twain, who came through these gates in 1869, claimed that you could walk entirely around the circumference of the city in 1 hour if you walked briskly.
But these walls are less than 500 years old, built by the Turkish ruler Suleiman the Magnificent. During its long history, Jerusalem has been completely destroyed twice and captured 44 times. The walls, gates, and buildings have been destroyed and rebuilt many times.
This is Damascus Gate, one of Jerusalem's busiest and most ornately decorated gates.
There are 6 other gates into Jerusalem, making 7 entrances in all. An 8th gate, known as the Golden Gate, was sealed off by Suleiman in 1541. According to Jewish prophecy, this is the gate through which the Messiah will enter Jerusalem, so Suleiman sealed it off, hoping to prevent the Messiah from doing so.
Just a little south of where I'm standing here by the Golden Gate is an area known as the Offal. The Offal means a fortified hill or a risen area. And just immediately south of the Offal is another hill where the city of Jebus once stood.
These ruins are all that remain of the Jebusite city before King David besieged and captured Jebus in 1003 BC and renamed it Jerusalem. David brought the sacred Ark of the Covenant into the city, establishing Jerusalem as the center of Judaism.
David longed to build a house for God where he could place the Holy Ark. So he bought a farmer's threshing floor from a Jebusite named Averna for 50 shekels of silver. And this was to be the site of the splendid new temple.
But God told David that he was not to be the one to build the new temple. Instead, his son Solomon would be given the task. This is what Solomon's temple may have looked like in his day. Solomon's beautiful temple stood for nearly 400 years, until in 586 BC, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar conquered and plundered Jerusalem, and Solomon's temple was burned.
In approximately 700 BC, 100 years before Cyrus was born, the prophet Isaiah prophesied that a king named Cyrus would allow the temple to be rebuilt after Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed it. After the destruction of the Jewish temple in 70 AD, the Jews never rebuilt a third temple during all those years. But why? I'm joined by Robert Mandelbaum, who's an eschatologist and Bible researcher. Robert, why was this? Why have the Jews never rebuilt their temple?
Well, thanks for having me, Chris. It's great to be here. After 70 AD, the Jews were scattered throughout all of the world, and there came a time when Jews were not even allowed to live or visit Jerusalem. They wanted, of course, to rebuild their temple, and thanks to the Temple Institute, which is just behind us, all the plans are already made. The sacrificial altar has been recently constructed. The priest robes have been made. Pretty much everything is ready to go.
Robert, help us understand, why is it so important to the Jewish religion to rebuild their temple? What is the significance of the temple to them?
Well, Chris, there's many important reasons, but the primary reason, the number one reason, is the Jewish people do not believe their Messiah will arrive until that temple is rebuilt.
So what's the problem? With everything set and ready to go, what's to stop the third temple being built? Well, the problem is that building you see over there above the Western Wall. It's called the Dome of the Rock.
The Dome of the Rock was built by the Arab Caliph Abd al-Malik in 691 AD. It stands on what is known as the Temple Mount, on the Haram al-Sharif.
The Haram al-Sharif is currently the site of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which has a silver dome, and the Dome of the Rock, which has a golden dome. And it has a tradition from the 12th century of being the place where Muhammad's stepped off of the earth and onto his horse, and then the horse was taken up into heaven, and so was Muhammad.
But there's no record that the Prophet Muhammad had ever been there, and even his armies didn't arrive there until 5 years after his death. The city of Jerusalem isn't mentioned even once in the Quran, while the Hebrew Bible mentions it more than 600 times. In Muhammad's lifetime, it was a fairly unimportant city in the Byzantine Empire. It was a Christian city without a single mosque. When the Muslims conquered Jerusalem, they chose to build their mosques on the Jewish Temple Mount, believing it to be a holy site. There they built the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa, whose name was copied from the story of the night journey in the Quran. Several Muslim scholars place the construction of the mosque around 690, while Muhammad died in 632. So how could Muhammad's famous night journey have taken him to a mosque in Jerusalem that wouldn't be built until after his death? The Quran doesn't mention Jerusalem, but says that Muhammad's dream flight took him to Al-Aqsa, which means the farthest place. Early Islamic scholars interpreted that to mean a heavenly place, or the courtyard of Allah. That all changed as Islam evolved into a political force. During the Crusades, the Muslim general Saladin changed Islamic tradition to strengthen the Muslim claim to Jerusalem. He stated that Muhammad's flight took him not to heaven, but to the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. And today, the Jewish Temple Mount is also the third holiest site in Islam, second only to the Arabian cities of Mecca and Medina. Muslims believe that once they claim a piece of land, it belongs to Islam forever. Still, at the beginning of the 20th century, Islamic leaders acknowledged the Temple Mount's Jewish history. In 1924, Jerusalem's Supreme Islamic Council published this tourist pamphlet on the Temple Mount. It says the site's identity with the site of Solomon's temple is beyond dispute. This, too, is the spot, according to the universal belief, on which David built there an altar unto the Lord.
One thing is certain. According to Bible prophecy, the temple will be rebuilt. And both Jews and Christians are looking forward to that day.